Alright, so back at it. When you're running these old things, not everybody runs them because they make everything stick out farther, but here we got carburetor, gasket, intake manifold. On this, since I am running the factory stock filter and everything, it's basically a carb with the paper gasket in between, sealing the carb to the motor. What this does, typically, especially on kickstart bikes, I highly recommend getting one of those phenolic or wood spacers or the fake plastic wood or whatever the hell it is. Run one of those inline. It keeps the carb much cooler than running it straight off the intake like this. On this one, again, being a stock design, I kept it that way to use the stock airbox, stock brackets, and all of that. But on kickstart bikes, if you're running it real hot for a while or ripping for a while, stop, get gas, something like that. A lot of the times the fuel in here can boil over and make it real hard to start. Those spacers tend to make a pretty big difference, in my opinion. If you disagree, let me know, but on all of my own personal bikes, I do run those, I don't know, 1/4-inch spacer or so in between. Runs much cooler, starts way easier, and significantly helps drivability and runability. So there's that. Carb reinstall, pretty much exact same thing that we did taking it apart. Take your choke cable, get that seated first. The amount of times that I've done this and not had that set up where it needed to be. Oh, I lied. Make sure your gasket goes on first. So you're gonna get your gasket. Let me pull these bolts through a little bit more just so I can rest all of this stuff in place. That should stay right there. Now, you got your bracket on your carburetor for the choke cable. This is what your choke cable seats on, so I'm going to set that in first. And I'm going to start with the bottom bolt just because it's a little bit more accessible from this side of the bike. Just get it a couple threads in, you don't need it all the way on yet. That upper gasket always wants to walk around on me. Normally this is a 3-minute job for me. Of course now with the camera on, it's going to take me forever to find the threads. Okay. Like I said, you don't need to go all the way, you don't need it fully tightened, just enough. Then I'll come over to the top, since this one's a little bit more tedious to get at. And just try and get a couple threads started up top here. Like so. And like I said with the choke cable, if this isn't at least in on the wire coming through, gets a lot more tedious trying to get that to line up proper. But it doesn't have to be all the way through into the lock for the choke cable adjuster, but at least have it into the housing so the cable's in the right spot. Get these hand tight right now, and then I'll go around to the other side and snug these down. Won't take all that much, so I'll jump around to the other side, just snug these down with the impact real quick, just because I'm lazy and this is faster. Okay, before I hook anything else up, what I like to do, I'm going to put this on the fuel line, I'm going to click the gas on, make sure it's not leaking or anything's overflowing. While I have it sitting here, I'll hook my overflow back up. I usually Sharpie, I don't know if you guys saw it in the earlier video before I started spraying brake clean on everything, but I'll write down the jet sizes when I go in through a carb on the outside just so I can see it. Here's the fuel line, so if we start getting gas dripping out down here, then we have a problem. So far so good, looks okay. So gas is on, working. Now let's do some cables. Drop your cable through into the housing, and pretty much the exact same way. I'll try and get the keyway. I'll start with the main, the throttle pull, since then I can actually use the throttle up top to help me guide that in. I feel like this is the harder of the two since it's in the back. But set that in the slot, pull it through. Obviously, there's no cable adjustments done at this point. So, since the gas is not leaking, I'm going to pull this off and make it leak. Then we'll do our return cable and spring. Drop these in. Snug it down. And reach up top. That was a bad idea. Don't do that order. Get this onto the body first and then pull it up through. So if I take this end, it's kind of annoying with the spring on here, and the fuel line nipple, but alright, so there we go. Now it's kind of a tight squeeze, but if I open this up a little, gives me room on that. Set it in the slot, drop it down. Like I said, I haven't adjusted anything on here, so it is going to go all over the place. Throttle cables are in. Then put the fuel line back on, like so. Then I can come up top and start doing my adjustments. A lot of people try taking all the slack out of these. I've seen it. Don't do that. You want a little bit of play on there. Otherwise, every time you even touch the throttle, it's going to rev up on you. So in order to do this, we're going to back off the adjuster. And you will have to do this on both. There's a pretty fine line there. So right now, a lot of slop. Keep coming back. What do they say, like an 1/8 inch or so is what you want on here. You don't want it like this. Right now, I have no play. Right about there. Tighten up your jam nuts. Got a nice throttle there. Accelerator pump is working really well. I'll bring you guys farther down so you can see that. Crack the throttle. Big burst of gas. Just like you want it. Then we can do our choke cable. So on the choke, you got this little Phillips head screw. I'm going to push the choke all the way in and guide this wire through the set screw. So this is going to go through these slots right here in the brass fitting. Reach around through like so. Now the choke is fully closed in this position. Fully closed. Which means this butterfly is wide open like it's supposed to be. So normally what I'll do here, because this is adjustable, you can move it a little bit. I set this all the way open. So when the choke is in, this butterfly is perfectly parallel to the ground. Right there. Then we'll take our Phillips head screwdriver and just tighten up this choke on the wire. Like so. Now if I pull the choke, this is going to flap closed. Fully closed. Fully open, fully closed, fully open. Make sure that's all working proper before we start putting all the rest of the parts back on. And tighten up this fuel line because we're not going to have access to it in a little bit. Like so. I'm going to leave the gas on in this case just to make sure it's not leaking. And that's the carb install. Everything else on here is ready to go.